Welcome to Solo Journeys podcast, where every journey begins with a single step. I'm your host, Sasha, and today I speak with Sean, a dating coach, whose journey from the oil and gas industry into the world of modern dating is as fascinating as it's inspiring. His story shows that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, and it sets the stage for what really matters: how we approach dating today. Stay tuned because beyond his personal journey, Sean shares practical, no nonsense insights on how to date more effectively, how to choose the right environments, avoid common mistakes, and build connections that actually last. Hi, Sean. Would you please introduce yourself?
I'm a dating coach. I primarily help independent women recognize emotionally mature men. My background was actually in oil and gas production operations management. I did that for 10 years. In the middle of that, I started my own personal development journey. I started going to therapy, reading all the books, and just overhauling my own life, going from being very depressed and anxious and having multiple addictions to taking control of my health and my mental health. And the further down that road I walked, the less I resonated with the people that I was working with. I managed a team of 53, and of that 53, I would say 47 were alcoholics. That's just part of the oil industry. Oil and gas has a low barrier of entry so far as education, but a high barrier of entry so far as work ethic. And a lot of blue collar, middle class, lower middle class families that don't have the money for education, but have a lot of work ethic that have been taught, go work hard and you'll make good money, end up in oil and gas. But people in these backgrounds that don't have education, that come from difficult home situations.
How did your conscious journey start? What was the turning point?
How does anything start? Does anything have a single moment or a single turning point? One of those, when I was around age 24, I had just become aware of the fact that at that point in time, it's not that I didn't love myself. It's that I realized that I hated myself and that I wasn't okay. And I just had really bad intrusive thoughts and negative thought patterns. And I, at that point in time, recognized I need to love myself more. Now, how do you start and where do you begin? And that journey actually took me a number of years. But that was a moment where I started to gain recognition. And then the next catalyst was years later, around age 27, my father died. And that was when I started to go to therapy and to really deep dive into personal development. And then there were a number of other things along the way, but I would say those were the two big shifts.
In these turning points, many people go down or go up. Obviously,
I went down.
You went up.
I went down before I went up. After a few years of being, really invested in the personal development space, actually having a coach of my own, stuff like that, really wanting to make changes in my life and just getting tired and fed up with my career in oil and gas and the emotional distance that I felt between the work that I was doing and the things I wanted to be doing. To keep it short, I had been planning to start a business or to buy some rental properties or something like that. And I just hit a breaking point at my job. And I decided that my goals have been to go travel in Asia and start an online business. Instead of buying a business to fund that, I can just fund myself. So that's when I left the US, going on a journey, both outer and inner. And I started taking some actual coaching classes. When I started coaching, I started in overthinking, and I did various types of overthinking coaching for a little over a year, but ultimately I was having three types of sessions. One was people who had quit their jobs, one was people who were stuck in their businesses, and one was people who had been single for years, who had been overthinking dating and wanted to change that. And ultimately, I continued down the rabbit hole of the third, and that's where I really expanded. And to add an extra layer, to circle back to my own journey, the very first workshop that I ever put together was actually a training for psychotherapists on gender identity, romantic orientation, sexual orientation, and relationship dynamics. Because I was actually a leader in the polyamorous community, and I had a lot of experience in gender identity, kink, things like that. So it was taking all of that that I had set to the side years before, going coaching, starting to talk about dating coaching, and just bringing all of it together to help people make better decisions, decision making, overthinking about who they actually want to be with. How do you recognize a red flag? How do you recognize a green flag? What's important to you in a relationship? What can you and can you not tolerate? I think that it's hard to talk about red flags without talking about green flags. To separate them is counterproductive. We're really talking about the same signs and how you as a person recognize them. And the same actions can be a red flag to some, but can be a green flag to others, depending on their needs. Personally, I live with anxious attachment style. So I need somebody who's willing to give a lot of attention and a lot of support. I need somebody who's willing and able to be there in that way. If you have avoidant attachment style, that's going to be a red flag because that person's going to smother you. Before we identify anything as a red flag or a green flag, obviously there's some things that are universal, right? Like narcissism is going to be a red flag no matter what. Somebody who's manipulating and controlling you is going to be a red flag no matter what. But the more important things are knowing, what do you need? Why do you need them? What kind of support can you give? What do you have to offer? And I don't mean how tall are you and what's in your bank account. I mean, how can you show up for your partner every day? Are you a person who wants to cook and clean the whole house? Are you a person who wants a lot of physical touch? Are you a person who wants to give a lot of gifts? How do you operate? And how do you need your partner to operate? Because if your partner is a person who only wants to give gifts, and that's a big part of their culture, and you're a person who needs a lot of physical touch, that's going to be an incompatibility, right?
How do you think one can initiate this awareness? It sounds easy, but it doesn't come easy, you know?
I think that a good question to ask yourself is look back at your past relationships. What actions from your partners helped you feel loved, safe? And the other side of that, what do you love to do for your partner? What makes you really happy? How do you really enjoy spending time with them? Just bringing some cultural awareness. I'm an American. I've recently moved to Asia. In Asia, gift giving is a massive part of the culture. It's so expected. So even if you're in the early phases of dating, girls will be bringing you. So even like I've had girls bring me flowers or just snacks, or like it doesn't have to be anything massive. We're not talking about jewelry.
Okay.
But and the expectation is that you'll be doing the same. Bring them a snack, a flower, a small gift, even a little stuffed animal, but things to show your affection through giving gifts. I gave gifts for birthdays or I gave gifts for holiday. But it's like, oh, it's our second date. Here's a snack. Here is a stuffed animal because it wasn't something that I was aware of. I show love through words of affirmation and physical touch.
But
Yeah.
you know, when we are dating, we are masking a lot. For me, the most important thing is how to crack this mask as soon as possible because you don't want to lose time, you don't want to lose your resources with the wrong person. How to do this? How to crack this mask?
The mask that you're wearing and the mask that the other person is wearing. To get rid of your own, you have to be willing to be rejected for who you really are. And if you're sitting at that date across from the other person, seeking their approval, then you're more likely to become who you think they want. When you're willing to be rejected for who you really are, and you're really okay with them not liking you, that puts you in control. That's the first step. And that's one of the hardest ones, especially if you are looking for validation from that other person. Once you have that, the second step is connecting with yourself while you're on this date and just genuinely asking, do I like the person that's across from me? I don't care if they like me. I'm going to show up as me. I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to be real. And if they like me, that's phenomenal, but I don't need them to like me. And then you have the opportunity to ask yourself, am I having fun with them? Do I feel comfortable with them? Do I feel safe with them? And if you're seeing signs that you might think are red flags, the question to ask yourself, what does this person want me to think about them?
Can you give an example?
If somebody tells you something one time, it's probably the truth. If somebody tells you that same piece of information 3 times, are they trying to convince you of something? So an example is you get hyper independent people who go out on dates, who talk about how much they love living on their own, being on their own, spending time on their own. And once the shell of that hyper independence comes out, they're actually codependent. Once they let you in and they trust you, they entirely take over your life. So when they're telling you something so many times, they want you to believe it because they want to believe it themselves. What does this person want me to think about them? If there's a point that they're making multiple times, really analyze that piece of information. That's why it gets to be so hard to talk about red flags without talking about green flags, because oftentimes they're very, very similar. And this is why it's so important for you to know what's right for you as a person. If you're in a situation and you feel super uncomfortable with the other person, that's kind of all you need to know.
I agree.
You don't need to understand why they are the way they are. You don't need to understand all their motives behind things. You don't really need to know whether it is cultural or psychological or exactly the reasons. You just need to know, do I feel genuinely safe with this person? Do I feel good with this person? Men don't use the word safe, men use the word secure. So, do I feel secure with this person? Women use the word safe. Do I feel safe? Do I feel good? Am I enjoying myself? Do I trust them? Do they consistently show up for me? And that's one of the biggest ones, right? Especially, we won't deep dive into anxious or avoidant or how much time people have, but do they consistently give you time and effort in a way that's unfailing? Or are you constantly sitting there wondering if you're going to see them again, when you're going to see them again? Do you know where you stand with them? You're not going to know that on the first date. But by the third, you're going to be able to recognize patterns about the way they do and don't show up. And especially in the first few months, these patterns of consistency are the most important. How do you feel when you're with them? Number one. How do you feel when you're away from them? Number two. And the second is just as important as the first. When you're away from them, are you still able to self regulate? Are you still able to eat and think and breathe and function normally? Because if you're in a trauma bond, if you're actually being attracted by the red flags, you are going to feel like you need this person. You're not going to be able to eat. You're not going to be able to think. You're going to want to text them all day. You're going to want to be calling them all the time. You're going to be insecure in that attachment. And that's going to take over your life. You're going to be more likely to abandon yourself and your own needs if you've got an attachment that's based off of red flags than green flags. But the problem is that our nervous systems are attracted to familiarity, patterns that we have lived through in the past. We feel attracted to someone because they feel like something that we have felt before. And if you were raised in an unsafe home, had unsafe romantic relationships early in life, then you have to stop and think, do I feel safe with him or do I feel triggered with him?
Where today one can find mostly suitable partner.
But this is going to start with you as a person. What do you like to do? Where do you like to go? What activities do you enjoy? And how can you turn that into doing something social? Because here's the thing, we have this idea that we're going to get approached on the street, or that we just need to go talk to the attractive person, or that the love of our life is going to find us in a cafe. And that's actually not how it works.
It might happen, but the chances are...
I'm not saying it never happens. However, if you want to bet your life on random chance, by all means. If you want to use dating apps, that's okay, but they lead to dating fatigue, exhaustion, and a host of other problems that we don't need to get into. What will work is if you're consistently putting yourself in a room with other people who enjoy similar interests, who have similar values, who are of a similar age group. And the really common societal point that's being made lately is running clubs. Running clubs are just dating groups. That works because it's typically people age 25 to 40 who live an active lifestyle, who have a similar interest, and they get together on a regular basis in a way that promotes conversation. New people are coming, people are leaving. So you have this constant churn. Now, if you're not a runner, that's fine. You don't need to be. But what can you do to create that kind of an environment in your life? This can be things like a book club. This can be things like language classes. There's a host of other exercise classes. There's dance nights. Salsa and bachata has become a thing worldwide. And there's people showing up to do these things once a week on a regular basis, coming and going, people of a similar age group, economic background. The more that you can create a rich social life, the less you're going to have to worry about creating a rich dating life because it'll happen more naturally. It doesn't matter what your interests are, but if you can use those interests to create an environment where you're going to meet people that share them, instead of just going to work, go to the gym, put your headphones on, don't talk to anyone, go to the grocery store and go home. You're not going to meet anybody doing that.
A piece of advice from Sean for people out there, or something that you would like to share as a last note?
Piece of advice from Sean. I'm going to give the most cliche piece of advice that you could possibly have, and then I'm going to expand on it in 1 minute. Love yourself first. When you already love yourself, it's so much easier to show up to that date and meet that other person without seeking their approval or their validation. And that's going to allow you to date much better. When you're giving yourself the love that you need, you're not going to accept lower. And if you're tired of hearing that and you don't know how to do it, start with this. Make a list of the things that you already love about yourself. Make a list of the things that you love doing. How can you feel the things that you love about yourself more? And how can you do the things that you love to do more? And how can you use those to give yourself the love that you need and let that transform your dating life?
Thank you so much. That was a nice ending. Another reminder, it all starts with understanding yourself, your values, your interests, and your red and green flags. Dating becomes much clearer when you know what truly matters to you and what you are looking for in another person. If you still have questions, feel free to share them in the comments. We will be happy to reach out and continue the conversation. Sean has also put together a practical guide on where and how to find the right date. Let us know if you would like access to it.